For the first time in galactic history, humanity stopped talking. No goodbye. No threat. Just silence. The Galactic Council, a union of 63 spacefaring civilizations, prided itself on transparency, diplomacy, and balance. And yet, the youngest member, the one with the shortest interstellar history, was suddenly, inexplicably, gone. Earth's embassies on Council planets? Abandoned. The quantum relay gates that connected their systems to the galactic grid? Offline. Ambassadors recalled. Trade networks severed. Even the human representatives seated in the Great Chamber of Harmony had vanished without a trace. Their seats were cold. Their emblems stripped from the pillars. At first, it was dismissed as a technical failure. Perhaps sabotage by rogue elements. But when a diplomatic fleet sent to Earth's orbit found nothing, no defense system, no welcome beacon, no orbiting traffic, panic set in. They weren't hiding. They weren't preparing for war. They were simply done. Council meetings turned into shouting matches. Accusations flew. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some said Earth had discovered something, a weapon, a secret, a truth the Council feared. Others believed it was a strategic move, a new form of soft warfare. Silence, after all, echoes louder than threats. But behind the public confusion was something deeper, fear. Not of attack, but of what humanity's silence implied. Because humanity wasn't just a member of the Council. They were the spark. The risk-takers. The species that dared, built, challenged, and disrupted. They pushed for reforms, pioneered chaotic new tech, broke old economic chains, and, perhaps most dangerously, asked too many questions. The Council tolerated it for a while. They benefited from it too. Human-led trade boomed. Military alliances grew stronger. Cultural exports from Earth reshaped galactic art and media. But still, the elders whispered, humans are volatile. Undisciplined. Unfit for balance. And then came the day of disbanding. That was what the humans called it, though the Council hadn't realized it was happening until weeks later. Earth's entire diplomatic network went dark simultaneously. Every channel blocked. Every feed silent. Then a single unauthorized message appeared on the encrypted CouncilNet. It lasted just 6 seconds. A simple text string. No animation. No voice. No signature. We are not angry. We are no longer interested. That was it. Nothing since. Behind closed doors, a few high-ranking members of the Council met to analyze the data. One of them, a Zentari named Kolvarin, who had long advocated for closer ties with Earth, broke protocol. He pulled a classified intelligence report from the Council's own surveillance archives. It showed something strange. Over the last 2 cycles, humanity had systematically withdrawn from every galactic partnership. Quietly. Legally. Even politely. They terminated trade deals. Phased out military treaties. Shut down education exchanges. Refused new immigration requests. No outbursts. No arguments. Just resignation. A pattern of retreat. And not just from others. From their own expansion. Human colonies beyond the Sol system had been evacuated. Terraforming operations ceased. Research outposts shut down. They were closing in on themselves. And then the data turned darker. Council drones observing Earth from lunar orbit noted massive orbital construction, dozens of stealth platforms with unknown configurations. Not weaponized, not inhabited. Just watching. Looking outward, never inward. But even the drones fell silent one by one, as their signal feeds were severed. Now the Council sat in emergency session, voices cracking under pressure. They're preparing for war. No, they're isolating for protection. Something scared them. They uncovered classified data. Maybe about the origins of the Council itself. We must send another envoy. And risk provoking them? We can't just ignore this. An elder species, the Darvani, known for their cold rationality, ended the debate with a chilling observation. This is not a tantrum. It is a statement. Humanity has learned all it needed from us. And now, It has nothing more to gain. The silence wasn't passive. It was powerful. Calculated. It forced the Council to listen to their own discomfort, to recognize the parasite of dependence they had placed on a species that outpaced them in a century. And now that species was gone. Some argued for aggression, to break the silence by force. Others suggested appeasement, beg for forgiveness, invite them back, offer incentives. But neither side could act. There was no target. No ambassador. No office. No door left to knock on. Then, a final twist. A Council data technician flagged something that had gone unnoticed, an Earth-side relay still active, hidden deep within a solar storm on the edge of the Oort cloud. A relay not broadcasting, but listening. It accepted only one type of transmission. Human code. No other species' signature passed through. That meant one thing: humanity had not left the galactic network entirely. They simply chose who was still allowed in. And no one made the list. That night, Colverin stood alone in the Council library, staring at a digital projection of the human homeworld. Silent blue wrapped in light. He whispered to no one. "You warned us in 1,000 ways, and we never listened." He thought about that message again. "We are not angry. We are no longer interested." The words didn't read like defiance. They read like disappointment. That was worse. Because you can negotiate with rage. You can apologize to fury. But disinterest? Disinterest is a closed door. And humans don't reopen closed doors. They break them. Or build something better without you. And perhaps, they already had. Valera knew the Council's silence wasn't peace. It was fear wearing protocol. Behind every law passed in those polished halls, behind every rule about balance and cooperation, was a single unspoken truth: no one understood the humans. Not really. Not even the ones pretending they did. But she remembered. She had been 9 cycles old when her shuttle malfunctioned during a border training exercise. Fire, panic, crashing into a frozen wasteland. Everyone else perished. She should have too. But the human found her. He wrapped her in heat foil from a wrecked module and carried her across 3 kilometers of fractured ice. No translator. No shared language. Just a steady hand and soft humming. She lived. And never saw him again. The elders claimed it was coincidence. That no one could prove it was a human. That he must have violated protocol and fled. But the memory clung to her, sharpened over time, unshaken by lectures or doctrine. Humans weren't dangerous because of their weapons. They were dangerous because they didn't ask for permission to care. Now, cycles later, the same girl had grown into a respected warrior. Decorated. Trusted. But her private loyalty still lingered elsewhere, in silence, in old stories, in the empty space where humans used to speak. And then it happened. A signal burst from the edge of the system. A crash site. Unauthorized entry. Impacted hard into the red expanse, uncharted wilderness far from monitored cities. Protocol dictated alerting the elders. But instinct won. She masked her ID and flew out alone. Smoke rose from the ruins, dark against rust-colored skies. The vessel was small, likely escape class. No markers. No flags. But the cockpit door was torn open, and inside lay what she had only seen in old footage. Human. Male. Mid-aged. Breathing barely. One arm shattered. Blood on the controls. And yet, his eyes opened when she touched him, clear and gray, and somehow steady. He didn't beg. Didn't plead. He only whispered, "So this is what silence gets you." She lifted him from the wreckage. No one followed. In a cavern carved between the cliffs, she rigged medical gear, hid her craft under camo netting, and waited. Over days, she cleaned his wounds, swapped synth blood cartridges, monitored oxygen levels. No questions. Just survival. On the 4th day, he spoke again. "You shouldn't be helping me. I shouldn't be doing a lot of things," she said. He smiled despite cracked lips. "Then you're my favorite kind of alien." She brought food. He told stories. Not military ones, not about the Council or Earth's withdrawal, but stranger ones. About street artists painting rooftops in the rain. About humans who built rockets in barns. About children pretending to be stars and inventing songs in dead languages. None of it sounded dangerous. All of it felt alive. When she finally asked why Earth had gone silent, he didn't flinch. Because we talked for centuries, he said. And no one listened. She waited. They wanted our strength, our speed, our passion, but not our voice. Not our soul. They liked us better when we acted like them. Why didn't you fight back? We did. With silence. He sat up, pain racking his body, but fire in his eyes. We stopped feeding the machine. No more trade. No more conferences. No more pretending we were equal when we were always being tolerated. She felt the sting of that word, tolerated. That was what the elders had taught her. To tolerate the passionate, the reckless, the emotional. To survive them, not stand with them. But Elias, he didn't survive. He endured. He taught her earth words. Rebellion. Grace. Grit. One night he quoted something called a poet. You only lose when you become what they want you to be. The words lodged somewhere deep in her. Weeks passed. She started skipping council duties. She fed him without gloves. She stopped recording the medical logs. Then others came. A mechanic who heard rumors of a wreck. A data clerk who had seen her flight logs. One by one, drawn by curiosity, or perhaps need, they found the cave. They met Elias. And they stayed to listen. He didn't preach. He didn't demand. He just spoke, and they heard themselves more clearly in his words than in all the council decrees they had memorized. When the elders found out, they didn't issue questions. They issued charges. Treason. Harboring an unregistered species. Corruption of civic values. She was arrested in front of 20 witnesses. They called her unclean. They wiped her rank from the archives. She wasn't allowed a trial, only a verdict. Exile. To the dead ring, a shattered moon with no orbit, no breathable air, and no communication grid. A place where dignity goes to die. Elias watched the announcement from the cave, arms still weak, jaw clenched. The broadcast ended with a final warning. Let this be a lesson. Some voices must remain silent. That night he stood, trembling but upright. He looked to the sky, then to the broken tools around him. And he began to plan. Not a protest. Not a war. A rescue. The first step of a rebellion no one expected. Because if they feared one voice, what would they do when they heard many? He wasn't supposed to survive. Not the crash, not the cave, and certainly not exile. But Elias had done more with less. He didn't need a battalion. He needed a reason. Veora was that reason. The moon they sent her to wasn't just desolate, it was a graveyard. Forgotten ruins of ancient wars, poisoned soil, zero atmosphere. She was left with only a cracked suit and a warning, the suit will last 6 days. She didn't ask for pity. She didn't beg. That, they thought, was enough to kill the story. But Elias wasn't finished. He found the old tech Veora used to power her cavern, antique council salvage, outlawed for being too adaptive. The kind humans once reprogrammed in hours. He used it to scan the system. Traced the signal of her shuttle. Found the coordinates of the exile drop. His body was still broken. His arm barely worked. He couldn't lift a weapon. But he could think. And he remembered. He rewired the crashed pod's remains into a pulse rig. No weapons, just velocity, shield buffering, and override signals. He stole a diplomatic clearance code from one of the data clerks who had visited. Their rebellion had already begun. Quiet. Underground. But growing. He launched before sunrise. In council chambers, the whispers had turned to panic. Elias's escape had gone unreported for 3 days. Multiple mid-level operatives had resigned. One even defected. Security requests doubled. And yet, outside the chambers, council citizens were asking dangerous questions. Why was exile required for compassion? Why were humans still seen as threats, when all they did was walk away? One elder said, "This is what happens when fire is not extinguished. It spreads." But they were too late. By the time they dispatched a security fleet to the dead ring, Elias had already reached it. The pod crash-landed hard, sending debris miles wide. He crawled through broken panels and fractured bone to reach the landing point. He found Veora unconscious, breathing shallow, suit power almost gone. He patched the seal, fed her oxygen from his own reserve, and whispered, "You saved me first." She woke in a haze. Confused. Dying. Angry. Then terrified when she realized what he'd done. "You came here? For me?" He nodded, voice thin. "I figured silence got us into this. Maybe noise will get us out." He activated the emergency beacon they jury-rigged to scramble council scanners. Instead of masking their presence, it amplified it. Across the system, signals bounced, bouncing off moons and mining rigs and silenced satellites. And they broadcast one sentence. "They feared our fire. But now it spreads." Every rebel cell, every quiet supporter, every council worker who had ever wondered, heard it. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a beginning. The council's response was immediate. A containment team. Gunships. Broadcasts condemning both Elias and Veora as destabilizers, a human virus infecting order. But this time, people didn't believe it. On 3 council worlds, mass walkouts began. Students replicated the beacon message and played it from rooftops. Mechanics painted the phrase on public transports. A mining colony renamed itself. Ignition. The council tried to shut it down. They blacked out networks. Deployed guards. Raided known rebel hubs. And still, the silence continued, just not from humans anymore. Other species began cutting ties too. Quietly at first. A trade agreement here. A diplomatic seat left vacant. Then louder. Speeches from governors. Entire planets decrying the council's hypocrisy. Demanding reform. No one asked humans to return. They had already given what they came to give. The rest of the galaxy had just taken longer to hear it. On the dead ring, Elias and Veora sheltered in a cave formed by impact. He could barely move now. The strain of flight, the crash, the oxygen transfer, it was too much. But he didn't complain. "You started something," she said, holding his hand. "We started something," he replied. She asked if he regretted it. "No," he said. "We told the truth. In silence. Then in action. Now it's their turn to speak." She could feel his pulse fading. She called for help, not the council, but the rebels. They had ships now. Resources? Connections. She sent out the coordinates, not encrypted, not hidden. And they came. Not soldiers. Not assassins. People. A medic from a forgotten moon. A translator who once taught Terran dialects. A scientist who had never seen a human up close. They came not to fight, but to witness. Because Elias was more than a man now. He was proof. Proof that a single act of rebellion could ripple through systems, laws, civilizations. Proof that humans didn't vanish. They evolved past the need to be heard by those who never listened. The medic stabilized him. The rebels took Veora aboard. And from orbit, as the first council gunships arrived, the rebel fleet turned on its cloaking tech, not to hide, but to show numbers. Dozens of ships. Hundreds of species. One signal. The silence is over. The council stood on the edge of collapse, watching the fire they once feared consume their false peace. And in the heart of it, a human who refused to stay rescued. A warrior who defied her entire world. And a galaxy finally ready to listen. The council tried to deny it. Tried to call it a flare-up, an anomaly, a fringe disturbance. But rebellion doesn't need declarations, it only needs momentum. And momentum was everywhere. 12 systems passed civil resolutions to leave the council's economic grid. 8 more closed their diplomatic channels. On the homeworlds of founding species, statues of the elders were pulled down not by mobs, but by silent workers who stopped asking for permission. It wasn't war. It was abandonment. The very same act humanity had committed, now multiplied across 100 cultures. Council leaders met in emergency conclave. Their statements were hollow. Unity. Order. Restoration. Words that once meant stability now sounded like begging. For the first time, the council was the one being ignored. And the one name they wouldn't speak, Elias, was the one name echoing in every city. Not as a leader. Not as a commander. But as a symbol of what they failed to understand. A man who walked away without vengeance. Who resisted with silence, then chose sacrifice instead of submission. He was recovering now, kept in orbit on a rebel medical cruiser. His lungs were damaged beyond regeneration. He'd never breathe on a planetary surface again. But he smiled anyway. "I never wanted to lead anything," he said to Veilra. "I just wanted someone to hear us." Finally, they were no longer alone. She had become something else entirely. Not a soldier. Not an exile. But a figure others followed, not because she told them to, but because she reminded them that laws aren't sacred when they're designed to preserve silence. She stood before planetary assemblies, face uncovered, species banners at her back, and spoke the words no elder had dared. The council wasn't built to serve. It was built to contain. And it failed. Her words were replayed across 1,000 ships. Teachers used it in classrooms. Merchants carved it into their storefronts. Even some elders retired in silence, realizing they were now standing on ashes pretending it was marble. The shift was not total. Some planets clung to the old structure. Some leaders labeled the movement as chaos disguised as hope. But it didn't matter. The myth of council infallibility was broken, and myths don't heal. Earth still remained silent. No broadcasts. No endless. No messages. But that silence no longer felt like rejection. It felt like permission. To rebuild differently. To speak louder. To finally question everything that was once untouchable. The rebel fleet grew, not through recruitment, but through volunteers. Scientists, engineers, peacekeepers. They built new relay hubs outside council control. Created neutral trade zones. Launched initiatives to help displaced species reclaim lost rights. They didn't ask Earth to lead. They led because Earth showed them how to walk away. Elias's name was added to a ship registry, not on a warship, but on a mobile school vessel meant to teach diplomacy through story, not compliance. Veilra's name became shorthand for resistance without hatred, rebellion without bloodlust. Together, they had not overthrown an empire. They just refused to accept it. And the galaxy had followed. The final council message came 6 months after the Dead Ring incident. It was short. 10 words. "We request dialogue. On your terms. When you're ready." It received no reply. Not from Earth. Not from anyone. The galaxy didn't need their permission anymore. In the quiet after that message, Elias sat beneath the false stars of a healing dome. He watched Veilra train young pilots, laughing, teaching maneuvers, explaining tactics she once learned to suppress insurgents, now shared to empower them. He breathed through filtered tubes, each inhale a reminder of what he gave up. And what he gained. She sat beside him afterward. Said nothing at first. Just held his hand. "You knew this would happen," she whispered. "No," he replied. "I hoped it would. That's different." She rested her head against his shoulder. "And now? Now we build something better." That was the real revolution. Not the silence. Not the exile. Not even the escape. It was the idea that better was possible. And that someone had to be the first to walk away to prove it. The elders had been right about one thing. Humans were dangerous. Not because they fought harder. Not because they spoke louder. But because they believed one voice could matter. And when one voice mattered, others began to speak. Then others began to listen. And that was how fire spread.